I stepped outside to clear my mind, and she was there. My friend's older sister, asking just one question, "Are you leaving?" The night was quiet, heavier than usual, as if the world itself had decided to pause for a moment. I found myself wandering outside, hands shoved into the pockets of my hoodie, trying to escape the cramped feeling inside the house. The soft glow of the porch light barely reached the edges of the driveway, leaving the rest in shadow. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the rustle of leaves in the faint breeze reminded me that I was alone. Or at least, I thought I was. I leaned against the railing, letting my shoulders slump. The events of the evening replayed in my head like a film stuck on repeat. The awkward jokes at dinner, the teasing from my friend, the subtle way his older sister had watched me from across the room. There had always been something about her. Confident, composed. Yet there was a softness there too, something unspoken that drew people in. I tried to push the thought away, but it lingered, like the lingering warmth of a fading sun. Then she appeared. At first, I didn't even realize she was there. A shadow moved across the lawn, silent and deliberate, and the faint glimmer of her hair caught the porch light. My chest tightened, and for a moment I wondered if I was imagining things. But no, the familiar tilt of her head, the way she held herself, the quiet assurance in her step. It was her. My friend's older sister, standing there in the night watching me. Her presence was oddly grounding. There was a calmness to the way she approached, each step measured but effortless, like she belonged here, like she had always been a part of this space I had claimed for solitude. She stopped a few feet away, the glow of the porch light casting gentle shadows across her face. She wore something casual, jeans and a loose sweater, but somehow she carried it with an elegance that made even ordinary clothes feel intentional. I realized I was holding my breath, uncertain why the sight of her in the night made my chest tighten. She didn't rush, didn't speak immediately. Instead, she just looked at me, eyes reflecting the faint light, unreadable yet attentive. There was no judgment, no prying, just presence, quiet and deliberate. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice soft yet carrying across the still night. "Are you leaving?" The question was simple, but it landed heavier than I expected. Something in the way she said it, curious, concerned, almost teasing, made the air between us feel charged. I wanted to answer, to explain, but the words caught in my throat. I realized I didn't just want to tell her where I was going. I wanted to tell her everything. The thought startled me. She tilted her head slightly, waiting, giving me space yet subtly closing the gap with her gaze. For the first time that night, I felt seen, not as a younger brother of a friend, not as a casual visitor, but as myself. And even though it was just the beginning, even though nothing had happened yet, I knew this encounter would stay with me. The quiet night, the gentle tension, the way she had simply appeared. It felt like the start of something unexpected, something quietly profound. Her question hung in the night air longer than I expected. "Are you leaving?" It was simple, almost casual, yet it landed with an intensity that made my chest tighten. I blinked, caught off guard, unsure how much to say. The words felt heavier than any question I'd faced that evening, as if beneath the surface, she was asking more than whether I planned to walk back inside. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, my hoodie sleeve brushing against my wrist. The breeze was cool, teasing the hairs at my neck, yet her presence somehow made the cold feel distant. She stood just a few steps away, neither too close nor too far, close enough to notice the subtle tension in my shoulders, the restless tapping of my fingers. Her gaze was calm, steady, probing in a way that made me feel both exposed and safe. I'm not sure yet," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Immediately, I cursed the awkwardness, wishing I could sound more confident. But her expression softened, not in judgment, but with an almost imperceptible warmth that made me feel like she genuinely wanted to understand. Her eyes searched mine, waiting, curious. "Do you need to be alone?" she asked gently. tilting her head in that familiar, thoughtful way. I caught the faint glow of the porch light reflecting off her eyes, giving them a softness that made the world around us blur just slightly. There was something intimate in the way she observed me, something that made my own thoughts louder, more immediate. For a moment, I considered telling her why I was out here, about the restlessness I felt, the mix of awkwardness and curiosity that had driven me from the living room. But I hesitated, unsure if my words would make sense, or worse, if they would reveal feelings I wasn't ready to name. Instead, I stayed silent, letting the night stretch between us, letting her presence fill the space I had thought of as mine alone. She shifted slightly, taking a step closer, though still respecting the unspoken boundary. The subtle motion brushed against my awareness, the faintest closeness sending a ripple through me that I couldn't ignore. Her voice, low and careful, carried a soft humor this time. "You know, you could just say if you want me to leave you alone." I laughed, a little awkwardly, but the sound eased some of the tension. I don't mind the company," I admitted, and even as I said it, I felt my own surprise. There was a strange thrill in speaking honestly to her, in letting her see this part of me. The part that was unsure, restless, curious. She smiled, small and knowing, a quiet acknowledgement that she understood more than I had said. That single smile, effortless, slightly teasing, yet deeply comforting, made the night feel warmer, closer, as though the darkness itself had retreated just enough for us to exist in this tiny bubble. And in that moment, the question, "Are you leaving?" became more than a question about place. It was an invitation, a quiet probe into something unspoken between us. A first step toward a connection that was already beginning to pull us together. The tension, the curiosity, the subtle warmth of her presence. It all lingered, and I knew the night was only just beginning. The night seemed to grow quieter as we stood there, the soft glow of the porch light casting a halo around her figure. I felt the pull of the darkness around us, but somehow, it didn't feel empty. It felt safe. Safe enough to finally speak, though I didn't yet know what I wanted to say. "I guess I just needed some air," I admitted, my voice low, almost swallowed by the gentle rustle of leaves. The words felt inadequate, like trying to describe a storm with a single raindrop. She tilted her head, her gaze never leaving mine, a quiet invitation that made it easier to continue. "I didn't mean to be out here like this," I added, unsure why the explanation mattered. Perhaps it was the way she looked at me, patient and attentive, that made me feel like the truth didn't have to be perfect, just honest. She stepped slightly closer, just enough that I could feel the faint warmth of her presence without invading personal space. Her voice was calm, a gentle anchor in the restless night. "It's okay," she said softly. "Sometimes, it helps to just step outside, to think." Her words were simple, but they reached deeper than I expected. I felt a strange relief in admitting the restlessness I'd been carrying, the nervous energy, the awkward social moments earlier in the evening, the sense that I didn't quite belong anywhere. And here she was, listening, really listening, without judgment, without impatience. "I guess I've been thinking a lot," I said, my hands fidgeting in my pockets. "About stuff. Life, school, my future. Everything seems kind of overwhelming lately." I hesitated, unsure if I should keep going. But something in her steady, encouraging gaze made the next words unavoidable. "And sometimes I feel invisible, like I'm just a kid everyone has already figured out." She didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix anything. She simply nodded, her eyes softening with understanding. "I get that," she said quietly. "Sometimes, it's the quiet moments that hit the hardest." Her tone wasn't condescending. It was empathetic, comforting, as if she had felt the same way at some point. I noticed the subtle details, the way she leaned slightly forward, the way her hands relaxed at her sides, the faint scent of her perfume carried by the night air. It was grounding, like her presence alone was enough to make the heaviness of my thoughts feel lighter. I realized I was holding my breath again, caught in the intensity of her attention, aware of how easily it drew me in. Without thinking, I spoke more honestly than I ever had. I don't know why I feel this way. I just feel out of place sometimes. The words came slowly, but they carried a weight I hadn't expected to release. She smiled softly, a quiet, knowing curve of her lips. "You're not out of place," she said gently. "Sometimes it just takes someone to notice you, and you're standing right here. So, I notice you." It was a small gesture, a simple acknowledgement, but it hit me in ways I hadn't anticipated. The night seemed warmer, more intimate, even though nothing had physically changed. The distance between us felt charged, not with urgency, but with quiet understanding, a fragile, tender connection forming in the cool night air. After a few moments of shared silence, the night air seemed less heavy. The tension between us hadn't vanished. It had transformed into something lighter, more teasing, like a tightrope we were both learning to walk. I found myself watching her more closely now, the way her sweater clung gently at the shoulders, the curve of her smile when she tilted her head slightly, the quiet elegance in the way she moved even in casual clothes. "You really like standing out here, don't you?" she said softly, a playful lilt in her voice. There was no judgment, just amusement, a warmth that immediately made me self-conscious. I scratched the back of my neck, trying to mask the way my heart jumped. "Maybe I'm just pretending I'm mysterious," I replied, trying to match her tone, though my words came out awkward and clumsy. She laughed, a soft, genuine sound that seemed to ripple through the quiet night. It was the kind of laugh that made even ordinary moments feel electric, the kind that drew me closer without a single touch. She leaned slightly against the railing, casual but deliberate, giving the impression of being relaxed while still drawing my attention. I noticed details I hadn't before. The faint sparkle in her eyes under the porch light, the subtle way her hair fell over her shoulder, a few strands catching the glow. I wanted to say something about it, but the words got caught in my throat, leaving me speechless in the best possible way. "Do you always think so much?" she teased, arching an eyebrow. "Or is tonight special?" I laughed nervously, feeling the warmth rise to my cheeks. "Tonight's definitely special," I admitted, though the meaning behind the words lingered unspoken. She caught it, I realized, in the small hesitation, the way my eyes flicked away briefly before meeting hers again. There was a quiet rhythm to the night now, a give and take between us. She spoke lightly about small things, her day, a story about my friend, some casual observations about the neighborhood, but even the mundane felt charged. Every word she spoke, every laugh, every glance seemed to hover in the space between us, small sparks of connection that made the night feel suspended. She moved just a step closer at one point, brushing her hand lightly along the railing. Our hands nearly touched, the proximity sending a shiver through me. I caught my breath, heart thudding, but she didn't pull back. She simply smiled, aware of the tension she'd created but leaving it unresolved. "You know," she said softly, "you could have come out here for a reason other than air. Maybe you just wanted someone to notice you." Her words weren't flirtatious in a bold sense, but there was an undeniable intimacy in them, a playful acknowledgement of the quiet energy between us. I felt my chest tighten in response, not from desire alone, but from the feeling of being understood, seen, and lightly teased in a way that made me both nervous and exhilarated. The night stretched on, quiet except for our laughter and soft conversation. Shadows danced across the porch, the faint breeze carrying the distant hum of the city. And somewhere between her teasing and my awkward attempts at humor, I realized that this playful tension wasn't just amusement. It was the first real sign of a connection forming, fragile and tentative, but impossible to ignore. The night had settled into a comfortable quiet, but the energy between us had shifted, dense, charged, unspoken. We had been talking, laughing softly, sharing small stories about nothing and everything, and yet every pause seemed heavier than the last. I realized I was acutely aware of her presence, The faint warmth of her body nearby, the subtle sway of her stance, the quiet rhythm of her breathing. For the first time, I noticed how she occupied space. She wasn't just standing there. She was commanding it effortlessly, the kind of presence that could make the ordinary feel intimate. Her shoulder brushed against the railing in a casual motion, but the proximity sent a flutter through my chest I couldn't ignore. I found myself instinctively leaning slightly closer, just enough that the faint breeze between us seemed charged. I could stay out here forever, I admitted quietly, almost to myself. Her head tilted, a small smile playing at her lips. Is that so? She asked softly, teasing but with a subtle warmth that made my heart lurch. I laughed nervously, trying to mask the way my fingers fidgeted in my pockets. Maybe, I said, voice low, it's peaceful. And, well, it's less lonely with someone to notice the silence. Her eyes softened, and for a moment I thought she might say something else. But she didn't. She simply nodded, the faintest brush of her hand along the railing near mine, so close that I had to resist the urge to reach out. That almost touch lingered, a delicate spark in the cool night air. We fell into another quiet stretch, both of us aware of the gap between words and the closeness that didn't need speech. The faint scent of her perfume drifted toward me with every subtle movement she made, mingling with the crisp night air. I caught myself noticing details I hadn't before. The gentle slope of her shoulder, the way her sweater moved as she shifted, the soft curve of her smile when she glanced down briefly, then met my eyes again. You've been awfully quiet, she said finally, her tone gentle, teasing, as if aware of the tension that stretched between us. Are you thinking about leaving, or just lost in your own head? The question caught me off guard. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, heart thudding in a way that wasn't just nerves. It was awareness, the pull of her attention, the unspoken pull that had been building since the moment she appeared. I wanted to tell her everything, but the words seemed inadequate, fragile against the weight of the night. I'm not sure yet, I admitted, meeting her gaze. My voice wavered slightly, and I felt exposed, but it was a good kind of exposure, the kind that made me trust her presence. She smiled knowingly, a soft, deliberate acknowledgement that she understood more than I'd said. And in that moment, standing there under the night sky, the world around us seemed to fade. There was only the quiet hum of distant city lights, the rustle of leaves, and the subtle electric tension between us. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't rushed. It was lingering, deliberate, fragile, and impossibly intimate in its own quiet way. For the first time, I realized that I didn't just want to stay out here. I wanted to stay here, in this space with her, suspended in this delicate balance of presence, curiosity, and something unspoken yet unmistakable. The night had grown deeper, but the quiet around us was no longer empty. It was full of pauses and glances, soft laughter, and the unspoken pull between us. Each small movement felt deliberate. The way she leaned slightly on the railing, the subtle shift of her weight, the faint brush of her sleeve near mine. I could feel my heart racing, not from fear, but from the strange, intoxicating awareness of her presence. I started, then paused, realizing that everything I had held back, the awkwardness, the tension, the curiosity I couldn't name, was ready to spill out. I swallowed and tried again, softer this time. I don't know why, but I feel drawn to you. I know I probably shouldn't, and I'm not sure what this is, but I can't ignore it. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise and something deeper, vulnerability, perhaps, or recognition, passing across her face. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to narrow to just us. The soft glow of the porch light, the distant hum of the city, and the fragile tension in the space between our bodies. I've noticed it too, she admitted quietly, her voice low and deliberate, carrying a weight that made me catch my breath. I wasn't sure if I should, or if I was imagining things, but it's there, isn't it? Between us. The words were simple, almost hesitant, yet they struck with the force of honesty. I felt a thrill, a mix of relief and awe, as if the silence we had maintained all night had been a fragile barrier, and now it had lifted just enough for truth to spill in. We moved slightly closer, naturally, without thinking. The railing no longer separated us the way it had before. Instead, it became a shared perch, a quiet platform for connection. We leaned in slightly, shoulders brushing, the proximity sending tiny sparks along my spine. Every detail about her, the curve of her smile, the warmth of her hands, the soft tilt of her head, felt magnified, as if the night itself had conspired to make every sensation sharper, more profound. I wasn't expecting this connection, I admitted, voice trembling just enough to betray my nerves. But I can't stop thinking about it, about you. She looked down for a moment, almost shyly, then met my gaze again. Neither can I, she said softly. I wasn't sure if it was appropriate, but maybe we just exist here in this moment. And it's okay to feel it, even if we don't fully understand it yet. The honesty in her words made my chest tighten, not from fear, but from something entirely different. A warmth, a tenderness, a recognition of shared vulnerability. Our fingers brushed briefly as we adjusted our positions, a fleeting contact that lingered in my mind long after. For the first time all night, I felt seen, not as my friend's younger brother, not as a guest, not as someone unsure of himself, but as myself. And in that quiet, delicate space, the pull between us became undeniable. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't urgent. It was something fragile, deliberate, and achingly real. A connection that could no longer be ignored. And in that shared silence, we both understood it. This night had changed everything. The night felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed to match the rhythm of our hearts. We were no longer strangers, no longer just the younger brother of her friend and the older sister who observed from afar. We were two people standing in quiet understanding, the weight of unspoken emotions finally shared. The tension of the evening transformed into something gentle yet undeniably powerful. I took a small step closer, hesitant, aware of every inch between us. She didn't move back. Instead, she let the space remain just as it was, allowing the closeness without forcing it. It was deliberate, careful, respectful, but in the simplicity of that moment, it felt intimate beyond words. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," she said softly, almost as if reading my thoughts. Her voice carried warmth, a calm reassurance that made the night feel lighter. I met her gaze, the faint light catching the edges of her smile, the way her eyes reflected something tender and unspoken. I realized I didn't want to go, not just from the porch, but from this space we had carved between us, this moment that was entirely ours. I don't want to leave," I admitted quietly. My voice shook slightly, betraying the vulnerability I had felt all night. It wasn't confession in a bold, dramatic sense. It was quiet, sincere, real. The kind of honesty that feels heavier than any action, heavier than any grand gesture, because it comes directly from the heart. She smiled, small and knowing, a gentle curve of lips that spoke volumes. "Then stay. Sit for a while," she said, gesturing toward the railing. And so we did, quietly sliding onto the wooden planks side by side. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of grass and distant city lights, but it no longer felt lonely. The warmth wasn't just in the space between us. It was in the shared laughter, the quiet conversation, the small touches that didn't need words. We spoke less and simply existed together, leaning slightly closer when the cold breeze drifted past, our shoulders brushing ever so lightly. Every glance, every small movement, carried meaning. The tilt of her head, the brush of hair from her face, the soft weight of her hand resting near mine. It was subtle, intimate, and entirely human. Eventually, she stood, stretching slightly, giving me a reassuring smile. "Whatever this is," she said softly, "we'll figure it out. No rush, no pressure, just honesty. That's what matters." I nodded, feeling the depth of her words, the clarity in their simplicity. The night had been a journey. First curiosity, then tension, then vulnerability, then playful warmth, then honest recognition. And now, finally, it was resolution. Quiet, steady, full of potential, and yet satisfying in itself. As I walked back toward the house, I cast one last glance at her. She was still on the porch, bathed in soft light, watching me with a gentle, knowing expression. I smiled, feeling a warmth that would linger long after this night ended. It wasn't a fairy tale ending or a sudden leap into romance. It was something more: connection, understanding, and a bond that would change the way we saw each other forever. And that, I realized, was more than enough. If you felt the tension, the quiet moments, and the unspoken connection in tonight's story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Comment below which part of their night felt the most real to you.